The inbox has been flooded. I mean flooded. Whatever our floodplain is, it is overflown by weeks and weeks and weeks now of questions about LSU. Not just from LSU fans. This is why I'm addressing this tonight. A lot of you, well, LSU fans ask in a more honest, inquisitive manner, how good do you think we're going to be this year? And then other people ask in a more sarcastic manner, there's no way you think LSU is still going to be good this year, right? The general quotes that I get from people that aren't LSU fans is, well, LSU's not going to be what they were last year. And my response, I don't always give it to them in person, but I'll just give it to you blanketly here as we look at footage of me stalking Ed Orgeron off the field in the national championship game. My response is, firstly, who says that they're going to be as good as they were last year? I know a bunch of LSU folks. I don't know a single one that has told me, oh, I think it's a repeat, man. I think we're about to duplicate what we did last year. Who has said that? No one in their right mind has said that. I don't think anyone expects that. Number two, here's really the most important question to follow up is, do you know of anyone else that's going to duplicate this year what LSU did last year? Because if there's not going to be that, then they don't need to duplicate what they did in order to be a contender for a national championship. Now that we have those two premises, let's check the plural on that. Those respective premises, once we have those out of the way, now we can start diving in a little bit. And we ask ourselves, as you have, as I said plenty of times, what would be reasonable in the expectation department for LSU in 2020? As I said, it's not a preview show tonight. It's not a prediction show tonight. Two things that I think I know. It's kind of a segment we do during the season. I think I know, fill in the blank. I think I know LSU's roster will be talented and skilled enough to go 12-0 this year. I also think that there are enough questions on their roster, and there are enough holes to fill, and their schedule is difficult enough to see them going 8-4. So how about that for nailing myself down to the wall? Somewhere between 8-4 and 12-0. But here's my larger point. Again, as we sit here May 24th, larger point is this. If you were to break out a Magic 8 Ball, if Colin walked in here tonight, he said, look what I found in the office. Magic 8 Ball, you shake it, what's LSU's record going to be this year? And it spits out 10-2 at me, or 9-3. I still don't really know anything. If we're talking about the long-term health of this program, if we're talking about the sustainability of the model that we saw them use last year and the DNA, that's kind of the adage I keep coming back to. If we're talking about duplicating over the long term what we think they instilled in that program last year, your record doesn't tell me a thing this year, unless it's 12-0, in which case I'm pretty sure we have a conclusive answer. But are we talking team or program? Last year, the 2019 LSU Tigers, was that a team or was that a program? Because you're talking DNA. Every team takes on an identity and a life of its own. A program's a program, but a team is 1 year's version of that program. And what you don't want to see, your biggest fear as an LSU fan, and your biggest hope if you're an outsider, is that team truly was lightning in a bottle, and they were, in the meteorological world, this is going to be nerd alert, they have what they call closed lows. They're like little bowling balls. I remember we used to get them sometimes. It's the best chance for snow if you live in Georgia. They'd kind of roll out of Arkansas and they'd come through, and you can't forecast them days in advance. But the thing about a closed low is it's kind of providing its own energy. It provides its own cold air. It's like it's independent of what else is going on in Montana or Maine or anything. And then once it's gone, it's just gone. You certainly hope that's not what LSU's 2019 team was, where they were just this entity in and of themselves that rolled through Baton Rouge, and it was a magical ride, and you'll remember it for the rest of your life and keep the t-shirt, but then once they're gone, when we're sitting here in 2025 telling the story, once they were gone, everything just returned back to normal. Normal for LSU would still be really good, but after you got a taste of last year, that's not what you want anymore. So, you know, I remember standing on the field when they're playing Alabama, and it's standing out to me so much that they were the aggressor. They were going into an environment that had crippled them mentally so many years in a row, and they didn't care. They put Alabama on skates early and often, and they dictated terms in the game. They did that in all the big games that they played last year, and for the first time in a long time, not only did you see offensive modernization, if not innovation, you also saw skills You also saw a skill set offensively being properly utilized for the first time, it seems like, in forever. You saw them take the fight to you, and you saw them forcing you to adjust to what they did instead of the other way around. Now we get to this year, and we talk about you telling me what they're going to do record-wise meaning nothing. Here's what I really mean by that. If Collins shakes the aforementioned magic 8 ball and it spits out 10-2, but the two losses are going to be by 14 and 23 points respectively to Auburn and Alabama. Or scenario B is 9-3, but they lose those 3 games by a combined 8 points. And it's nail-biter city, and it just so happens that better teams in Tuscaloosa, and pick 2 of them, I don't care, Auburn, Florida, it's just hard fought, and they don't get out-executed, and they don't throw the games away. It's just they didn't stack up this year roster-wise good enough, but they still played with the same edge that they did the year before. I'm taking the 9-3 scenario over the 10-2 scenario all day long. Because here's the bottom line. Even when LSU was what they were before this year, they could roster their way to 9 wins, and in some years 10 wins, but yet you still knew at the end of the year there is a gap between us and Alabama, and therefore there's a gap between us and the top tier of college football. If you're thinking beyond 2020, you're thinking 2021, 22, 23, you see how they're recruiting. Guys, talent's not going to be an issue for them, and converting it into skill, which is a lot less frequently talked about than talent, but is more important than just the talent, that's not going to be an issue for them either, I don't think, in the foreseeable future. But the identity and DNA and makeup, the mental makeup collectively of the program, that's what you want to make sure is intact. And if it's intact, I don't care if they go 9-3 this year, you'll be able to tell. If they lose to Alabama, how do they lose to them? What does the game look like? I can assure you, I don't expect 31-13 on the side of the Crimson Tide this year if the DNA has been properly injected and then it's been harnessed. Because you can turn over all the other stuff. As long as you have the foundation laid, that's the expectation. That's what's reasonable. It's reasonable to expect Ed Orgeron to earn his money in maintaining the identity that they forged last year, independent of what the record's going to be this year. Because the record will be back. Man, they got a lot to overturn this year. They got a lot to replace. And they don't get to do it in this vacuum of a weak conference like some others may get to do. They got to do it right smack dab in the middle of the toughest division, most competitive division in college football. So it's very realistic to drop off to 10-2 or 9-3 and still be one of the 10 best teams in the country. If that is the path they go this year, I'm not worried about LSU at all. I think they'll be just fine.